Hi, everyone. It's me, your professor, Chris. We should really talk pretty early on now about why you should even be in this class, or what the point of this class is. Maybe another way to put that, um, why this class matters. Okay? So, philosophy and ethics is a branch, a subsection of philosophy. Philosophy is about asking tough questions. It's about the deep ideas in life that don't have obvious answers. Okay, um, so think about it. This might have already happened to you, some of you. Um, a grandparent's really sick. They're in a lot of pain. They're basically on life support. What do you do? Um, you don't really want to pull the plug because you care about them, and it might be morally wrong to do that, but you don't want to let them sit there suffering for no point at all either, right? Real life throws these kinds of difficult situations at people, and I'm sure all of you have run into something like that before. um, Part of what philosophy does is it thinks in advance about those tough questions. um, it thinks long and hard about them, so that when we're confronted with situations like that, we're not caught off guard, and we're not left scrambling to figure out what we really want to do for the first time. Okay. um, if we don't if we don't It's not exactly a plan, but if you don't think about your values, your ethical and moral values in advance deeply, then what will happen is sometimes you'll be caught in a situation you didn't see coming. Or even if it's something you've thought about before, in the moment you might say, well, I always thought I'd never, remove someone from life support, but now I see grandma and it's making me think more. It might change your mind. So what philosophy does is it helps you get clear on your ethical values, so that when you have to use them, when you actually are confronted with doing or not doing something, you feel sure and certain. You don't feel like this is some idea that you're maybe or iffy about. You really thought about it and committed to that value. You own it, and it's your bedrock instead of just something you might change your mind about. Okay? So um, let's move on a little bit further. That's just philosophy and ethics in philosophy in general. What a lot of people will say about morality, these questions of right and wrong, it's also something they say about philosophy in general. They say, well, these are all just opinions, right? Joan thinks it's wrong, Johnny thinks it's right. And it's all just opinion, there's no agreeing on it. So, what's the point in fighting about it? So, what I would say in response are a few things. One is that these things matter, right and wrong, whether the death penalty is morally permissible or not, um, abortion, what we can and can't do morally in war, these things matter a lot. So, if anything's worth thinking about, they are, because they matter so much. Another point I'd say is this: is these things are worth expressing yourself about. Think about social media now. People express themselves about all sorts of stuff. People have um, pages and pages where they say what they think about Harry Potter, or about the Marvel universe of comic book heroes and stuff, right? We express ourselves about things all the time, but we're somehow unwilling to express ourselves about these issues that matter a lot, right? So, you might leave a review on Amazon or on Yelp or something like that. You'll express yourself about whether the takeout food was hot enough, but you won't express yourself about whether you think electrocution's a legitimate way to punish people. Mm, right? We express ourselves all the time. So why not express yourself about this as well? Okay. A third point I'd say is it's uh, like I said, the objection is people will say, well, we just all disagree about this stuff. There's no agreement. It's all just opinion. But I'd say that's not actually true. We do agree about this stuff. There's lots of people you agree with about, say, your view on abortion. And the how you agree on it is because you both believe in the same kinds of reasons. Okay. So that's really a big part of what we're going to do in this class is we're going to track down the reasons behind thinking something's right or wrong. And then we're going to sort of evaluate those reasons. So there is in fact agreement, and agreement is based on reasons. So we're going to find those reasons for agreement. Final point I'd say about this, about, oh, why do we argue about these sort of opinions anyhow, is that to change your mind about your moral views is not a sign of weakness. I think to a lot of people, it feels like, no, this is mine, this is my view, and I'm not going to change it for anybody else. But really, changing your moral viewpoint isn't a sign of weakness and caving to somebody else. It's a sign of growth, that you're developing and owning more and more your own values. So it's a sign of strength, if anything, not weakness. A related point is this. A lot of people don't want to get in a debate or an argument about morality because they feel like, well, I don't want someone changing my ideas. I don't want their view changing my view. It's personal. But really, these ideas aren't as personal as they seem. Or let me explain. A lot of people think, well, this is my opinion, my view. But really, they got that view from their parents. Or they got it from some book they read when they were in high school that the teacher made them read, right? Or they got it from a religious authority, or they heard some politician have some good quote about it. So a lot of our moral views, it's not all that personal in the sense that, oh, it's yours and nobody else should take it away or change it. You got it from someone else in the first place. So the way I think about a lot of moral views is that they're not so much mine and I can't change them. They're more like hand-me-downs from someone else. They're like hand-me-down clothes from your parents or whomever. And hand-me-down clothes are great, but they don't usually fit that well, right? And they might be a little out of date, a little out of style because they're from an earlier era. So think of this class as not me telling you right or wrong, but you looking at the values you currently have and finding some of them maybe are hand-me-down values that don't fit you very well. They're not really your style, or they're old-fashioned somehow, right? But you only know if they fit you well or not, these ideas, if you really think deeply about them and talk to other people about them, which is our whole class. Okay. So that's why our class matters in a nutshell. You have good reasons to develop your own values and sort of think deeply about them for your own good, basically. Something else I'd like to say is that philosophy about ethics and morality is not just opinion, and here's a little proof of why. When philosophy talks, we try to use logical statements. We give reasons as proof for what we think. Now, what logic looks like is when you say things like this. When you say, if it rains, it's going to be wet on the ground. Or something like, if it rains, therefore it's wet on the ground. Now, do you see how an idea like that is basically always right? And do you see how an idea like that is something we can all agree on? I mean, if someone says something different, oh, it's raining, but the ground's never going to get wet, I'm going to think there's something wrong with them. Or if they say, it's raining, therefore blue. What? That's illogical. It's literally irrational or illogical. So some ideas, not all of them, but some ideas are like, when it rains, therefore the ground gets wet. You move from rain to ground being wet. Like that every time. But the thing is, these ideas are trickier than they seem because you'd think, oh, rain equals ground wet, maybe ground wet equals rain. Nope. It's not logical. It's also irrational to say, if the ground's wet, therefore it must be raining. Because sometimes the ground is wet because someone has been watering their lawn, or I have a crummy old car, it's leaking fluids, on the ground. Do you see what I mean? Always when it rains, the ground's going to get wet. But it's not always true that if the ground is wet, it must have been raining or be raining. Right? So part of what philosophy does is it uses logic, the things we can all agree upon. if it rains, the ground's going to get wet. Okay? To build up reasons or proof for more complicated ideas. Okay? Now, what this requires is that sometimes you have to be very finicky or precise or exact with your language, because if you accidentally say the ground is wet, therefore it's raining, sorry, you're wrong. But if you are precise and you say what you mean, which is that if it's raining, then the ground is wet, therefore the ground is wet, not only will I agree with you, you will agree with yourself in 20 years, because that's always going to be true. And everyone you talk to is going to agree with you, because it's obviously always true. Okay? So that's part of what we're going to do in this class is we're going to read and think. We're going to read closely and think deeply to make sure we're being exact about our logical claims. Because even when you're talking about morality and ethics, right and wrong, there's, whether you know it or not, there's those logical claims being said in the background. And when you say something like, because it's raining, therefore the ground must be getting wet, everyone's going to agree with you. They're all going to be convinced by what you say. But if you're sloppy about what you say, if you accidentally say the ground's wet, therefore it must be raining every time, people are just going to, they're going to, instead of being 100% behind you, they're going to be sort of behind you and sort of not. Okay. So I've showed you a few things here. One is that not everything's just opinion. There are some things on which we can totally agree. Those are logical claims that are pretty obviously true all the time. Another thing I've said to you is that philosophy uses and focuses on those kinds of logical claims. Now, we can add those two things together. Philosophy focuses on logic. Logic talks about those things that are always true. Things that are always true, we can all agree upon. And you see how one idea moves to the next? They're logically connected. Philosophy talks about logic. We define logic as things that we all agree upon, okay? That are always true. Then we compare those to other ideas we've heard. Well, we shouldn't argue about ethics and morality because they're just opinion. What's opinion? Things we don't all agree upon. But then I've showed you that philosophy, I forget how many fingers I'm holding up, that philosophy sometimes does talk about things about which we can all agree on all the time. Therefore, it's not opinion, because opinions are those things that we can't agree on. Okay? Now, do you see part of what I've done there? I showed you what logic is with the rain, wet example. But then I used logic to show you that philosophy is not just opinions. I show you that philosophy is the opposite of just opinions, things we can't agree on, because it tries to make claims that we can all agree on. So it can't just be opinion because it's the opposite of opinion. Okay? That's a big part of how our class is going to work. Is we're going to look for the things that seem obviously true, that are backed up and supported, and we're going to focus on those. And we'll use those as sort of our signposts or our guideposts through this very messy thicket of moral arguments when people disagree about what's good and bad. Okay? So I want you to think of this class sort of like computer coding or building a car, something like that. If you're careful at each step of your reading and you're careful at each step of writing your papers, then what you'll do is you'll link these claims and logic together in a really airtight way that's going to run smoothly like a good car, or is going to function with no bugs like good computer code. Okay? What we're going to do as well is we're going to look at other people's writings to see if maybe they wrote some faulty, buggy code that doesn't work very well, or to see if they maybe forgot a few parts in the car, you know, like the transmission, and so it doesn't really run as well as it seems. So we're going to analyze arguments. Okay, so that's how philosophy looks at morality. Is it looks for those signposts of logical things that we can all agree upon. Okay. But you might say, well, that's what philosophy does. So what? Why should I care? When you get good at this, when you get better at this, because you're already good at it, what you'll see is that you can spot in other people when they have sloppy or imprecise arguments, when they are not being logical, when they're saying things that don't really add up, things that might sound good, like if it's wet, it must have rained, sounds good. But then you stop and you think about it, you go, no, they've got their logic flipped backwards. Think about it this way. If you're on the right, say, if you're conservative, surely some of the people at Fox News are smarter than others. Some of them have better ideas than others, right? They can't all equally be as smart. They're not all perfectly right all the time. Okay, so even if you're conservative, I'm not trying to change you into a liberal. Wouldn't it be nice to know who to trust on Fox News more? Which people are more logical and more accurate? Yeah, it'd be great. Same thing. Let's say you're on the left. Rachel Maddow, is she the smartest, most accurate person in the liberal media? Maybe. Maybe she's the worst. How are you going to tell? You're going to use philosophy. You're going to analyze their logic or their argumentation. That's how. Now, you might say, we're almost done here, but you might say, no, I already know to trust Rachel Maddow, or I already know to trust the person on Fox News because what they say I agree with. That's like saying that your sister, when she writes computer code, must always write good computer code just because you already like her. Or it's like saying, this is an exaggerated example, but it'd be like, Stalin, who murdered a bunch of people, Stalin must be wrong because I don't like him. I don't like what he did, even when he's doing math. But if Stalin builds a car and it runs well, or Stalin does math and it adds up right, it doesn't matter if you don't like him or you don't agree with him. Like the proof is right there. So again, part of how this is useful is that what we normally do, all of us, is when we like someone or we like what they say, it feels good because they agree with us, we'll assume that they must be right, that they must be accurate, logical, whatever. But it doesn't work that way. That's why you have to think about this class and analyzing other people's views, like computer coding, building a car, whatever. There are factually better and worse ways to code things. There are factually better and worse ways to build a car. And you don't want to buy a car from someone just because you like them or just because they work for Fox News or they work for MSNBC, because that's your views. You might get stuck with a crappy car that way. Right? So that's what we're going to do in this class. And that's, again, why it's useful or important to you. I'm not trying to change your views on anything. I'm trying to help you get better at sorting out in the views you like, which ones are more and less rational, which ones are more trustworthy because more rational and more true. That'll help you win arguments with other people. It'll help you be more sure about your own values because you've tested them and know that they run well, like a good car. Okay. That's the value of philosophy, and that's the value of studying ethics through philosophy. Okay. Any questions about this or anything else, just email me. I'm always here, just a click away. Okay. Thank you, everyone.